Is there a major myth about the mushroom supplement industry that you wish you could just debunk?
I think just that mycelium is amazing. Mycelium has amazing compounds that you won't find in the fruiting body, because mycelium is essentially the roots of mushrooms. A lot of superfoods are the roots and not the actual flower or the fruit itself. So there's always a lot of benefits within the roots. And so that's essentially one thing I think it's good for people to understand, is that mycelium is beneficial. It's the starch levels that people need to be aware of. So knowing where your mushrooms were growing is important.
Julian, welcome to the podcast. It's really great to have you here.
John, excited to talk with you. I've been a fan of some of your podcasts, and just the topics around well-being is something I nerd out on, as a CEO at Life Cykel and just personally. So excited to chat.
Before your journey into mushrooms, this began with a sustainability project, right? Repurposing coffee waste into mushroom cultivation. That's a cool story to me. So talk to us about that and how that shifted into this functional mycology health movement.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess when we first started out, 10 years ago, we were seeing, sustainability, a huge topic. How do you feed the world? How do you feed the population? How do you do it sustainably? At that time, a lot of lab grown meats were coming out, and Beyond Meat and all that kind of element. And just to be honest, wasn't a big fan, of the ingredient list and the processing. And, nature has all the things that we require, and so we just have to work more harmoniously with nature. And so mushrooms just tick all the boxes, from pesticide free, very low carbon footprint in terms of water use, in terms of land use, in terms of deforestation. So it just ticks all those sustainable boxes. And a protein source, amazing amino acid profile, low carb, no sugars. So it ticked all those boxes from a food. And so very initially intended it as being an agricultural company growing mushrooms, particularly oyster mushrooms, shiitake, and a couple others, but mostly oyster and shiitake. So we were growing them in sea containers, and doing, 300 to 500 kilos per week out of one sea container in an urban environment with very low water use, and catering to all the cafes, all the restaurants in the area. And so we looked at that as a model to help feed the future. I love meat, lamb, all the sources of protein. It's just about having another source of protein that would help feed 9 billion people. And so that was sort of the very original intention, something that we're still very passionate about. But then from there, it evolved into, performance, immunity, like you spoke about, brain health, and all these elements that functional mushrooms can do for us.
So I want to back up even one step further before the coffee grounds and this discovery. Talk to us a little bit about your journey from being a physiotherapist to how you got to be where you are now.
Yeah, so I was, I guess, a normal Aussie kid growing up in Australia. You love sport, like the Americans, like the Canadians, like we love our sport. And so growing up, playing semi-professional, and then realizing, you through injury and ability, not going to be able to make a career out of it. So I went into physiotherapy with the intention to be a sports physiotherapist and work with elite teams. And so I went through my studies, and very lucky, my first job out of university after graduating was in the English Premier League. So sort of like the NFL of soccer in England, if you like, or, of NHL. So one of the top tiers. And so I was very lucky to work in that elite environment with sports psychologists, medical professionals, work with the best surgeons in Europe with our athletes. And so I loved that. It was very one-on-one. You work with that player to get his ankle back, or his knee, or his groin. And after a while, I just thought, I wanted to be able to scale impact and scale help. And so after a couple of years, just wanted to sort of reposition how I spent my time. But I loved it, and I do love sport, and I love performance. And so sort of it came full circle, because, we didn't start Life Cykel and mushrooms thinking that we would be a performance longevity brand, but that's sort of where it's led into.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So you've had this background in working with performance and athletes, and it's sort of translated right into this. So is this considered a supplement? It's not really a food. So what category do you guys live in?
Yeah, we live as a dietary supplement now,
Yeah,
with our
yeah.
lion's mane Cordyceps ratio. It's a dietary supplement, and then it sort of bleeds into, longevity stacks, biohacking stacks,
Mhm.
protocols, But the beautiful thing with the mushrooms is they cater to everyone. If you're going through menopause as a female, then maybe the reishi and the cordyceps are great for energy and your nervous system. But also reishi is great if you're a student, but it's also great if you're a business owner and you're flat out. So they're very ubiquitous in that they speak to everyone, depending on what you're after. And so that's what we love about it. It's not just for the athletic population, even though we work with UFC athletes, NFL teams, and the likes.
Yeah, so before we get into some of the functional benefits and the performance aspects, I just wanted to talk a little bit about science, potency, extraction,
Yeah,
and things like that.
yeah.
So, first question is, what is how many mushrooms would you, how many lion's mane mushrooms would you actually have to eat to get the same benefit as one of your tinctures, for example?
Yeah, it's around about 10 to 1, 10 to 1 extraction process. So 10 kilos to one sort of kilo that gets extracted into 1 liter of liquid.
Okay.
But then, as well as that, to make these compounds, like let's speak to lion's mane as example with erinacea as one of the key compounds within the mushrooms, you're not going to be able to get that through ingesting. It has to go through an extraction process. Now, this extraction process is very soft in the sense of how it's done. It's a dual extraction, water, ethanol. It's no heavy additions or machinery or tools that are used, but it still allows for the compounds to be pulled out of the mushrooms and be bioavailable. So with a lot of these mushrooms, you can't just chew them and get that same absorption. And so that's sort of part of our patented extraction process, because we grow and extract everything out of Wisconsin in Green Bay. And from there, we've learned over the 10-year period just how to extract it really well, patented that extraction process. And one of the key elements with mushrooms, because there's a lot of conversation, debate, mycelium, fruiting body, for the people that hear about mushrooms, which one, we're like the Switzerland where we believe there's benefits to both.
Mm-hmm.
Mycelium has a role to play, absolutely. Fruiting bodies have a role to play. They both have different compounds. So we like to have a full spectrum product, not a product in isolation. When you think of isolating compounds, that's more a pharmaceutical model where you're looking at one compound, versus with a full spectrum product, you're looking at the synergistic benefits that, to be honest, we don't even really know the full, you know, uh, majesty and physiology of how that's working. We just know that's, what nature has sort of designed. And so keeping those starch levels down in the mycelium, that's the critical element. That's where mycelium can get a bad rap, because mycelium grows on a carbohydrate base like a rice or a wheat. And that's fine as long as the mycelium is extracted from that product. And a lot of the time with mycelium products, and we've done a test across the market in Australia and the US, we find that there's very high starch levels in the finished product. And so you're consuming starch. So extracting that mycelium makes the compounds really bioavailable and potent. And then the fruiting body as well is that's our premise, and how we show up with our products and what we think gets the best results.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to note too, because a lot of people say, well, just eat the whole food. But the little bit I know about mushrooms is that you don't even get the most of it from eating them raw. You really kind of have to cook them to get the benefit from them. And then what you're saying further is the bioavailability in your body from eating the raw mushroom or the fruit body, probably not going to be what it is after you extract it. So I think that's really important. So, if people are doing mushroom supplements already, what are some of the quality red flags that they should watch out for in that supplement space? Like you mentioned, starch content, or grain fillers, things like that. What are some things people should look at in choosing a mushroom supplement?
Yeah, I think you want fruiting body and mycelium. And when you're looking at mycelium from the back of the label point of view, you're going to see that it's grown on rice or grown on, wheat. And that's okay. But a very easy, scientific test you can do at home is put the powder on a plate and add some iodine to it. And if that powder turns black, purple black, then that shows up for starch. Because if you grab a piece of bread or something that's carbohydrate based and you add iodine, it turns black straight away. It turns a dark purple black, and that's a starch present. And so if your mushroom powder turns purple black, that's a starch presence as well. You shouldn't have that at all. So
Mm.
from our lens, we prefer liquid extract. That's why we make liquid extracts. We believe this is more bioavailable. We did a study with the University of Queensland last year, which showed that our mushroom liquid extracts versus mushroom powders we're up to 7 times more bioavailable and potent. And what it showed in the study is that within a 24-hour period, which is also amazing, is that actually you're getting a physiological change within 24 hours of taking the product.
Mm.
But what you're seeing under microscope and what they saw at the University of Queensland in the Brain Institute was that you were getting neuronal outgrowth. So they could see the neuronal outgrowth within the cells immediately within 24 hours, but it was up to 7 times more with our liquid extract versus powders. And so we're a proponent of absorption and bioavailability. And so liquid extract is superior to powders for most things, because anything that has to go through the gut and the stomach, it's a very acidic environment. There's a lot going on in there. It's
Mm.
non-discriminatory. It's just trying to break everything down. And so really how much of it can get into the bloodstream, very limited, versus if you're able to take things sublingually, then your blood vessels and your vascularization under your tongue allows it to go into the blood. So that's one amazing way to take it. But even if you take it as a liquid, it absorbs a lot quicker than as a powder, where there's more steps for it to be broken down.
Yeah, so I want to talk now about some of the functional benefits and how it affects human performance. I can talk from my own experience. I was on a 3-month quest to improve my REM. Like my sleep was pretty good. I was getting decent deep sleep. REM was atrocious. So I did a bunch of things, blue light blocking glasses, early final meal, all those types of things. But I started using lion's mane regularly. And so I was wondering if we could just start with lion's mane and talk about what are some of the cool things lion's mane can do for you. What are people taking it for? What types of patterns you've seen through user feedback or even personally?
Yeah. Well, the lion's mane REM relationship's a really interesting one, in that it wasn't showing up in the literature at all. It just came subjectively,
Right.
notably through Dave Asprey at first, who, is a biohacker measuring everything, and so N=1 as the subject. He was able to sort of see on his own data, through his Aura ring, that the REM sleep was increasing through lion's mane. And then because a lot of people and even other brands would only speak to lion's mane to take in the morning for focus, for concentration, all of those elements. But if you're taking it at night, it's still acting, and it's acting on the brain to support that REM sleep, which is, as you know, is a critical part of translating short-term memory to long-term memory, about consolidating whatever you've learnt that day and locking it into a deeper memory system that allows you to store it and regurgitate it, remember it later. So lion's mane for REM sleep, incredible. For focus, for articulation, for post concussion, in that specific case, really good. We've had a lot of athletes, surfers, fighters, MMA fighters. Even if you're getting some micro trauma, or you've had a history of concussion, you should definitely be taking lion's mane. Um, One other one that's super interesting is arthritis. So, when it comes to arthritis, we think it's the joint, and being a physio, we were taught it's wearing down of the joint that's causing the pain. But really, what the most recent science shows is that it's the nerve endings that are inflamed. And so lion's mane helps with neuroinflammation. And so it doesn't fix, the cartilage at the joint, but it turns down the inflammation at the joint. And so we noticed that in the older demographic, with subjective feedback around, okay, my arthritis in my hands isn't as bad anymore when I take lion's mane, and when I stop taking it, it comes back.
Hmm.
So this is the amazing thing about mushrooms and the applications being so wide, but lion's mane for decreasing neuroinflammation. So what must that lead to? A whole cascade of longevity markers, because if we think of neurodegenerative issues that we see, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all of these things are neurodegenerative, you know, ailments that take place as we get older. So if we can slow neuroinflammation with lion's mane, then potentially you can slow the onset of those things. And if you take it earlier, the performance benefits are incredible. So I could talk about lion's mane all day. I don't want to chew your ear off because there's other mushrooms to talk about.
Yeah,
That's
for sure. Yeah, no,
that's the
so I got that tip from Dave Asprey actually that you mentioned it,
yeah.
and I didn't control my protocol just to isolate the mushroom, the lion's mane I was taking. I was also doing the glasses, the early meal, and all that.
Yeah.
No alcohol, but combined, my REM sleep went from averaging 13 to 15 to over 20 consistently. And yeah, it's been great. And of course, when you're sleeping better, everything else works better.
It's the key fundamental. I think the discipline for the morning routine is easy. The discipline for the evening routine is the one everyone needs to nail. And I have to put my
Yeah.
hand up myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's talk about cordyceps now. So cordyceps is also interesting. Tell us about that one.
So cordyceps, I mean, we're a society that loves caffeine and we love stimulants and we love energy drinks and we love to feel that energy because of probably mostly likely on the back of poor sleep. Trying to band aid poor sleep, we're having extra caffeine, extra stimulants, and so cordyceps is one of those natural sort of energy boosters that's actual real energy in the sense that, as we know, caffeine is just blocking receptors, telling our body we're not tired, so we're going to get it. We're getting a sleep debt, we're getting an energy debt. Whereas what
Right.
cordyceps is enabling to do, it enables ATP production. And so it allows the mitochondria to produce more ATP. So it allows our own body to create more energy in a real way that's sustainable. And so from that, you get not that peak and trough, which is an artificial energy boost from caffeine and stimulants. You're getting over a 4 to 6 hour wave of smoother energy, not that peak. And so you're not getting that crash either because the body is producing ATP. It's all very natural. It's all very much in alignment with the biology of our body. So it's incredible from a functional point of view. If you're crashing in the second half of the day, if you're a long distance type, athlete, or you're trying to do a second workout, or you're running a marathon or you're running a triathlon, anything long distance, that second half of the day, that second half of the game, you're just not as fatigued. You're not gassing as quickly. And that's what we hear subjectively. And that's what the athletes report, whether it's like the second half of the game, the last few rounds of the fight, of the run, of the swim, I still felt like I had a lot of good energy, So that's where it's really, really popular. And that's really where it originated, was in the Olympics with some long distance runners and some Chinese long distance runners. And then they drug tested them and they sort of said, oh, what's going on here? And really the story was that, Chinese medicine, because a lot of these mushrooms date back to ancient traditional Chinese medicine. When I visited China, the reishi mushroom and these mushrooms like cordyceps are revered. There's a lot of paintings on the walls within temples. The reishi mushroom is known as the mushroom of immortality in China. It's in all their Chinese traditional textbooks from thousands of years. And so it's not new, but the extraction process that we're doing today is bringing it full circle to make it really bioavailable. But that's the cordyceps: energy, anti-fatigue, no crash, libido elements to it, viral elements, antiviral when it comes to respiratory conditions. So that's one that's really interesting. So it's good to take over winter for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Syracuse, New York, where I live and teach. Yeah, we don't see the sun for a long time between the middle of November until maybe April or May. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
important. But I was it was 2 years ago. I was training for a sprint triathlon and a fairly long bicycle race, and yeah, I was doing the full spectrum of mushrooms in your biohackers box,
Yeah.
and yeah, I can relate to that. I definitely felt like, I mean, I improved my time over the past couple of years, even though I was a year older. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I did better. So again, I didn't control it and just isolate the mushroom extracts, but it was just part of a larger effort that I was doing. But anecdotally and just from my own behavior, I felt there was a benefit for sure. Yeah.
It's
What are
hard
the
when you're
other
really on
ones?
that train. So
Oh,
when
sorry.
you're
Go ahead.
really on that train, you're never really isolating too much because you're doing so many things. But you look at the literature, and I think subjectively you still notice something, but it's a 1 or 2%. Versus if you're a person who's not doing too many things, those customers feel a 5 to 15% uplift. Maybe a
Hmm.
20% uplift.
Yeah,
So,
and I was going to ask you about that. The data you guys are collecting and keeping, is there peer reviewed research that's coming out of your products? Or are you just kind of extrapolating more generally or broadly from the research on mushroom extracts?
we'd always love to do more research. Coming from a physio degree and a science degree, understanding the journey of research and getting it peer reviewed, and just the sort of the cost and the time element to it while running a business. We try and do both because we're very heavy in the science. So we've done a study with University of Queensland, which is the lion's mane one. There's further studies to do there. Once you do a study, it asks more questions than answers, and so there's plenty more things we want to
Right.
explore. And then we did a study with the University of Newcastle, another very popular and highly regarded university here, where we spoke about immunity, and we looked at turkey tail for immunity. And what it showed was that it really helps support and grow levels of interleukin 10. And interleukin 10 is very important as a cytokine for anti-inflammation when it comes to cold and flu, when it comes to rhinovirus. And so that's what we showed there with the turkey tail mushroom. So we've done initial trials and studies and we'd love to do more, and we will. As we go on this journey, we're 10 years old now, and so that's really what we want to lean into. Being a trusted authority when it comes to the science and the extraction process and the quality of the product, because we've seen so many starchy grain powder products out there, and we sort of see it a bit like the CBD space, where CBD was kicking off and going really well, and then there was just too many inferior products out there that the consumer got bedazzled by, like, well, which one's trustworthy? And then they had a couple of experiences and they didn't feel maybe what they expected. And so it waned off, and this is the risk with any industry that gets very popular. So we've got a very high retention on customer base, and it's just about education. And to your point, science is critical.
Yeah, I worked with a cannabis and CDB or CBD company for a while, and so I learned a little bit about the science of that. But you're right.
Mm,
If consumers are paying a lot for supplements, hoping to get a benefit, and they don't see it, they're just going to stop taking it. And I think the unfortunate thing is that the bad actors or the poor companies that just jump on the bandwagon sort of ruin it for everybody else, right?
mm,
And so that was my next question: is like, mushroom supplements have seen a boom lately. And you just said you've been at it for 10 years, although, you've only been on my radar for maybe a year and a half or 2 years or something. So
yeah.
I did want to get into this notion of overnight success and how long it actually takes to achieve an overnight success. But talk to us a little bit about the landscape of mushroom supplements, and that sort of thing. It's just so you know what's out there, and how do you guys
Yeah.
stay committed to quality, over this trend that we're seeing now?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the background of growing mushrooms, the origins of growing mushrooms, and that has supported us along during the way, because, as a founder or as a D2C, entrepreneur, it can be very easy just to buy a white labeled product from a manufacturer and put a label on it and become a marketing company. And that's the majority of brands out there. And I think those brands won't last the test of time, because really, we're really, consumers are narrowing in on product and feeling and benefit. And so we've done both, in the sense that we understand the importance of marketing and education, and on the back end, we've noticed the importance of vertical integration and innovation. If you look at all the best companies in the world, they're innovating in their lane. They're leading in their lane, and that's why they're enduring companies. And so by doing that, everyone was doing powders and capsules because it's easy, and the economics are really good on it, and you can add starch to the product or not remove the starch, and the economics are really good for it. But the potency is not there, and so the customer's not sticky, and so you don't build a following, a loyal customer base, a loyal subscription base, which really drives your company. So it took us longer to build that out, and as you said, you sort of heard about us in year 8 or 9. So that first 5 years was very much about infrastructure, vertical integration, understanding how to best extract, how to best grow, and building that out and scaling that. But yeah, the capsule powder space, you know, we're not offended by it, but we're not in love with it, because we just think it's not the best form of taking the product and taking the supplement from a bioavailability point of view, a purity and a potency point of view. And so we're very big proponents of liquid extracts when it comes to mushrooms. We're very big proponents of the fruiting body and the mycelium, as long as the mycelium is, removed of all starch. So our starch levels sit around, between 0.5 to 1.3%. We've tested a lot of the big brands across, all the retail markets and websites and Amazon and these places, where the capsule or powder, the average is sitting around anywhere between 32% up to as high as 68%. 68% starch when you think you're buying a lion's mane capsule or powder, you're actually buying 68% of blended rice, blended grain. So that's, you know, in our eyes, almost criminal, and it's really bad for the industry. And so that's something that we're not fans of. And we haven't called out brands, specifically, but we call out that as something that consumers should look out for. And as I said, you can do the iodine test. And so I think for us, it's just about innovating within the mushroom space, more science, more studies, and bringing out amazing products that you feel the benefit pretty quickly.
Question on the iodine test, because that is something that is useful. People can do that. If they don't have iodine laying around, can they do it with iodized salt, or does it really need to just be like pure iodine?
Doesn't need to be pure iodine like a
Okay.
Lugal's iodine, but there's many benefits for iodine. So we should all
Yeah.
have iodine in our pharmaceutical first aid cabinet. It's great to add to water. It's a lot of people are low in iodine. So it has a dual effect. You can test your mushrooms, but add it to your water. It's a part of a base level biohacking cabinet.
Yeah, yeah. So, is there a major myth about the mushroom supplement industry that you wish you could just debunk? Does one come to mind, or did we kind of cover it already with the starches and the capsules and things
I
like
think
that?
just that mycelium is amazing. Some people are, a lot of some brands will say, "Oh, it's got mycelium in it." Mycelium has amazing compounds that you won't find in the fruiting body. And if we look at a lot of superfoods, because mycelium is essentially the roots of mushrooms. A lot of superfoods are the roots. Are the root structure and not the actual, flower or the fruit itself. So there's always a lot of benefits within the roots. And so that's essentially one thing I think it's good for people to understand is that mycelium is beneficial. But as you said, we've probably spoke about it, it's the starch levels that people need to be aware of. And I think with everything, Australians love Australian grown and Australian made. It's no different with Americans and Canadians as well, And so knowing where your mushrooms were grown is important. And so as a Wisconsin, USA, proudly grown, which we're very proud of.
Yeah, no, that is great. I mean, of course, yeah, people want to know where things come from and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we move into your story as an entrepreneur, which is also quite interesting, tell us maybe a few really interesting success stories, or just some anecdotal evidence of people who are using these and have achieved interesting outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I see there's a wave in the background there. Are you a surfer or
I
you like
am,
the
yeah,
ocean?
yeah, as much as I can. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one that comes to mind is Owen Wright, a surfer, professional surfer, big wave surfer, and he was competing for the world title, right up there in the top five for the world, and had a really big wave hit him, and he had a micro trauma or a concussion, a series of micro concussions that led to a bigger concussion that caused a near death experience where he was unconscious, had a near death
Oh,
experience,
wow.
which you measure in the blood through, your DMT levels in the blood at that time, and then you're sort of clinically diagnosed as having, a near death experience, which he later spoke to us about. But it was through someone else who was using our product, who was the World Surf League health coach and chiropractor, and he recommended to Owen because on his road back to recovery, he felt there was like some sticking points there where he just wasn't remembering what he wanted to remember, wasn't able to pick up tasks, because he went from high level pro surfer competing for world number one to wheelchair bound to not being able to remember his name and his family and things like that. And so it was a huge recovery process. And he really said that lion's mane and the REM sleep just really supported that recovery and that regeneration of neurons. It was something he did everything, went to every clinic around the world that was important to him. But that was one that he said notably was a game changer. And from there, he then cancelled some of his contracts with bigger companies that weren't aligned, stimulant
Mhm.
drink companies and things like that. And we worked with him, and he went on from that to then win a bronze medal at the Tokyo Olympics, knocking out. He was in that heat competing for a medal against world number one, and he knocked him out. Which the other element of that story, because what REM sleep does is improve dreaming. So he was taking lion's mane all the way from the recovery all the way up to winning a bronze medal, and he shaped his board based on a dream he had
Hmm.
from the lion's mane. And so the lion's mane does create a lot of dreaming. And so dreaming is a good thing. This is when you're also getting that short-term memory to long-term memory consolidation. It's very regenerative for the brain. So that's one story that's just like, that's quite interesting and quirky, because the dreaming element helped him carve the surfboard. Because he's a tall athlete, he went to his shaper and said, I actually want a small board and I want it to be like this and this and this, which, the carver's like, that's quite bizarre, but that's what he went with, and that's what he won a medal with. And so that's a fun, interesting story. But I think the arthritis one also stood out for us, because it's not in the literature anywhere. And this is where we know we're making a great product, when we're getting feedback from customers that's not in the literature. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because that's how literature starts. It starts with an idea, it starts with feedback, it starts with a hypothesis like, well, hang on, maybe lion's mane is good for arthritis. No one's ever looked into that. So maybe that's a path for us to go down with research. Um, so, yeah, many stories, but I guess they're two that probably people haven't come across before when it comes to lion's mane.
Yeah. Who is the big wave surfer? What's his name? Are you
Name
able to?
Owen Wright, Australian surfer in the WSL.
All right.
He's
Yeah,
retired
sure.
now.
No, yeah, I
Yeah,
follow WSL, longboarding, big wave, all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool. Really neat. Yeah.
yeah.
So let's talk about your journey for a little bit. So you went from being a physiotherapist to a mushroom farmer, a mushroom grower, to
Much.
to a biohacking company, or not a biohacking, but a mushroom supplement company CEO. Manufacturing, and I mean, there's a lot you have to do in your role that you probably weren't educated and taught how to do. So talk to us about that journey. How did you figure this out? How did it go for you? And how did you keep yourself in a good place from a mental, physical, and spiritual well-being place along that journey?
Yeah, I think that last piece is critical. That's where it never makes sense until you sort of look backwards. And so the
Mhm.
physio element, because there was a part of that role was also, I spent a lot of time with the performance coaches in Formula One, for Lewis Hamilton, Mark Webber, Sebastian Vettel at that time. And so I was one on one with these guys. So I was learning how these performance coaches, because I was looking at that as a career path, look after those guys. And it's really no different to how we have to think about ourselves as CEOs and founders and business owners. Like, I think athletes back in the day would drink and get away with it and still perform and whatnot. But as an athlete, as a founder, as a CEO, as an executive, you can't, you have to be dialed in. And so I think that helped with this 10-year journey. Otherwise, I would probably most likely be pretty burnt out, and I wouldn't have
Mhm.
been able to endure it. And I would have had a health compromise there, and mental health and emotional, physical health. So I think that was a great apprenticeship, that helped, because, as you said, came in with a pretty clean slate, of not having any business background, not knowing what, really finance, operations, any of the marketing, no background in any of these areas. So it was very entrepreneurial in the fact of just being around good people, having good mentors, good advisors, building a good team, and learning and making mistakes, and just being consistent and working our butts off for 10 years, and that's the base level of ingredients, I guess, of what helped us along the way. And for sure, plenty of mistakes, and we still feel like we're just getting into it, in the sense of, okay, we've done a decade, but there's so much more and things we can do and things we can do better. And so I think, yeah, we're still probably just finishing up the apprenticeship now, the first decade, of business.
Yeah. At what point in the journey, was it early on, or was it about midway through, or was it even fairly recently when you thought to yourself, okay, this is going to work? We have a company that's going to make it.
I think it was when the lion's mane chief scientist brought the lion's mane home, because at that time we were very entrepreneurial, like living together, working out of a garage type thing, like,
Yeah.
just live and work. That was all we would do. We'd eat dinner. After dinner, we'd be working together, and so it was very intensive hours early on, which I think can't be underestimated with the focus and just the dedication that's needed early on to get it off the tarmac. But when he
Mhm.
brought that product home, and I tried it the next day, and it was just very instantaneous, with the lion's mane. And I think that's what's always missing in the supplement space is, some things do take time. Granted, they do take time to develop, but when you can have something that has instantaneous benefit and brain and mental clarity, which everybody wants, okay. and it's in a category of its own. That was the first piece. And then, of course, present it to the market, and you see that adoption curve, and you see that feedback, and you see that retention. Okay, we really narrowed in on that, and because we were doing a lot of things within the fungi kingdom. We were doing packaging, we were doing soil remediation, a whole host of other areas that you can get into with mycology and fungal biotechnology. It's infinite, really, the applications for humanity and for the environment. And so, really, once we got that market adoption and we knew that that was a winning product, which today is still our number one product for sure, that's when we sort of knew, okay, we've got something here. And then the big moment would be, I guess, when Joe Rogan mentioned us. That was one. And prior to that, Dave Asprey. So when you have these, subject matter experts, these titans of industry, acknowledging your work, acknowledging your product, I guess that's when you know you're on the right product, on the right track path.
Yeah, and what was that? A year, 2 years? Like how deep into the beginning of your journey
That
was
was
that?
year 4 and 5, something
Okay.
along those. So
All right. Yeah.
yeah,
So you were grinding away until anything like that happened, right? It was just,
we were
yeah.
in the
So
dark working on the mushrooms. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So and I really appreciated what you said about just working. You ate dinner, then you went back and worked. And I think entrepreneurs get that, right? That they know, hey, there's a lot to starting a company. You can't fall asleep at the wheel. You got to be on all the time. And while you're doing that, it also sounds like maybe you were doing other things to support yourself so that you could keep doing that. Right. So what was your habit or supplement stack, or what were your practices that enabled you to get through that, maintaining your health? I mean, I'm assuming you maintained your health because we're sitting here now, but
yeah.
what were you doing along the way?
It's definitely evolved as information has evolved. Back then, it was pretty. I say year 1 to 3 and 4. It was pretty generic but consistent in the terms of movement, exercise, eating a clean diet, eating a low carbohydrate diet, whole food diet. Low carbohydrates can, but if your blood sugar is inconsistent through carbohydrate consumption, then your mood and your energy and your clarity is going to be inconsistent. So really keeping that down, I think, and timing of that is important, because if you're having as an example, a large carbohydrate meal at lunch, the second half of your day, you're pretty useless. At least I am myself. And so timing of food, diet, nature, Sunday we would always be, hiking or at a beach or doing something in nature to decompress, away from technology. So we sort of called that, Sunday church. So Sunday church was
Mhm.
making sure you're in nature, you're with friends in community, and you're just sort of like removing yourself from it completely. And then it was typically a 6-day work week is what we were doing. But it's about having fun on the way, and we were working with friends and inspiring, people as well along the way, other people building business, so community. And that being said, I guess that's because I came from a base of zero knowledge. If you don't come from a base of zero knowledge, I think there is an element of you don't need to, be going as hard in terms of hours because like the pathways, and so it changes over time. But then, yeah, from now, in the last 5 years, it's sort of just part of my life now. But I guess the longevity biohacking part is quite, to some people, may seem a bit extreme. Like we just completed a 3-day fast, a 3-day water fast last weekend, with the Life Cykel community. So we had 1,200 people sign up to a 3-day water fast. So we had some team members, but a lot of the community on our email list sign up. And so I do 3-day water fasts quarterly, or at least biannually. Just an amazing way to detoxify the system, autophagy, DNA repair, mental clarity, visceral fat. Just there's so many benefits for fasting. So there's those things. There's detoxing, saunas, ice baths daily. So yeah, it does get it's quite extensive, but I think that holds me in good stead for the long term.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had some tools in your toolbox, right? Because I think that's the part that a lot of people miss, especially the entrepreneurship students that I teach at the university. They look up to people who have founded companies like you, and all they see is the hard work and the grind. And I think a lot of times they worship that part of the hero's journey, but we don't often hear about all the things you have to also do to support yourself to perform at that level. So thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem,
Yeah.
no problem.
So as an entrepreneur, what are some of the things that you found, I guess, most surprising along your journey?
Mm, most surprising. That's a good question. Because I came from a zero base, so
Right.
a lot.
Yeah.
It's all been learning on the way, and I think entrepreneurship 10 years ago, as you would have seen, and 10 years prior, it's evolved in itself, and the conversation around it has evolved, and that last 10 years has really been a hustle culture conversation, you know, and you got to burn the boats in other parts of your life, which I don't think are necessary, and actually is not good either. Why win one prize and then lose three others, whether it's your health, relationships, friendships? And so I guess that's the surprise, is that there's not many that are doing that, to be honest. There's not many that are able to have all the balls up at a high level. And so I think that's what is going to be exciting to see with the conversations that are happening and with the experience of, great entrepreneurs, talking from a place of them achieving some things and missing the boat on others. So I think holistic entrepreneurship and designing your life around it as well in a better way, I think that's a real measure of intelligence, is actually, designing your life and not just winning one medal by building an 8-figure company, by building a 9-figure company, but, at what cost? So that's sort of, I guess I'm more about the balanced entrepreneur, not the extreme entrepreneur that burns other boats, that are actually really valuable for a meaningful life.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And there are periods where it's maybe out of balance, right? So when I think of balance or when I teach balance, I'm usually thinking over a broader period of time, right? So in any one 24-hour period, you might not be able to hit all the things. But over
Yeah.
the course of a week or a month or certainly a year, you should be able
Yeah.
to find some balance.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
true. Very true. No, because it is an extreme game. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It's an extreme game. And that's what when I was working with the English Premier League players, they are the 1% of the 1% when it comes to footballers. Every kid out of Brazil, every kid out of Spain, they want to be in the English Premier League. And so I'm working with 15 or a squad of 30 of 12 teams, 20 teams. They are the 1% of the 1%. So I learn a lot from their mentality, their mindset, because a lot of them come from very humble beginnings. But at the end of the day, business is no different. The businesses that you see on the NASDAQ or on the S&P, they are the 1% of the 1% also,
Mhm.
and those startups as well. And so, it's competitive. And so that's what I think a lot of people love about it. But, that's the name of the game. So it is a balance with balance, because you got to have a healthy relationship. But as you said, today for me doesn't look very balanced, as back to backs all day and some
Right.
things in the evening. That's fine, but maybe on the weekend I'll balance it back out.
Yeah, I think it's just that perspective, right? And I love talking to elite athletes and elite entrepreneurs because there are so many similarities. And if I could boil it down to one thing, it seems that it's resilience, right? So elite athletes they've got to work hard, they're tearing their bodies down, but they build resilience tools. And similarly with entrepreneurs who operate at a high level, they know they've got to work really hard for long periods of time, and they need the resilience in order to be able to do that. You can't possibly do what you need to do as an entrepreneur if you're not maintaining your overall health. So I think
Yeah.
that's a great point. Yeah.
And that's the lucky thing about business people, is that they get a second chance, or a third chance, and you can reinvent yourself in your 40s and your 50s and your 60s. As an athlete, you have a finite window. So,
Mm-hmm.
between 20 and 35 for most athletes in most sports. 35 is an old athlete in a lot of sports.
Yeah.
So, 31, you have an injury or you don't perform, you may not get your contract renewed, and then it's sort of a very slow or a quick down spiral, whereas business, okay, your business can go ass up at 34, but you've got all those learnings and you can go again, and within 24 months you can have something going. And so
Yeah.
that's an amazing ability as well, an amazing opportunity, as long as you're
Yeah.
resilient.
Yeah, because if you're an athlete, once your body's done, doesn't matter how much you know or remember, you're just not physically going to be able to do it. But in business, your body could be failing on you, but you've still got a lot to offer. So yes,
Yeah,
making sure that you're incorporating some sort of resilience practices so you can make it to that level and enjoy
Yeah,
the fruits of what you've developed, you know?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
So when you look at the next decade or even the near term future,
Mm.
what gets you excited about the role of mushrooms, mushroom extracts in human health and performance?
Yeah. I think mass adoption is the next wave. Like it's
Mhm.
becoming, it's been niche. Um, Athletes and the likes, and so on that adoption curve, I think we're really about from our point of view looking for adoption for the everyday person, and biohacking and longevity interest not being niche. It's a part of everyday's life because everyone has a stressful life today. Everyone's living in a bit of a more toxic world than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago when we talk about air, water quality, food quality, soil quality. So it's not really an option anymore. You must be supplementing with key nutrients that you're deficient in. You must be doing these things to manage stress levels. You must be engineering your life to get good sleep, for the most part because of the stress level. So I think supporting the masses is important to us, not just supporting athletes and people who are, interested in it from that point of view. So that's one big tier for us, is how much of an impact can we have, and I heard this like very early on, which was like, to build $1 billion company, you got to impact 1 billion people positively. And so
Hmm.
that's sort of like the how we're sort of thinking about that translation. So okay, if our revenue is this, does that mean we're impacting that many people to an element? Okay, so to grow revenue, it's very simple. Just impact more people positively, and positively enough that they notice you and want to come back. And so that's, I guess, where we're up to on that journey, and branching out beyond just mushrooms now. Mushrooms is our hero and what we're known for, but we've got a range of longevity tools, the nasal tape, the mouth tape, the sleep mask, the red light mask. Those things are all amazing tools, again, just to help us work with engineering good sleep, good breathing, good nasal breathing. All those elements are important. Beyond that, we've got some super nutrients that we're bringing out, like we've got a liposomal NAD and NR.
Oh,
So this is
nice. Yeah, I
really
take NMN now. So yeah, tell us
yeah,
about with that.
yeah. So very just. I mean, as we get older, our NAD levels drop. Our mitochondria is not able to produce as much NAD as we get older, and so that's why we're less energy levels. If you imagine picture someone who's 70 and picture someone who's 20, NAD levels will look like this, in different ways. And so supporting a slowing down of that NAD depletion, that's what NR, NMN both, can do. And so it's something we've been working on and bringing out a liposomal product in that. And so we've had that out for a few months now, very popular. So because we've got that back end vertical integration, because we've got that core science team, we can branch out into these key areas, not too wide, but just in things that we know are beneficial and that we believe in.
On the NR versus NMN and NAD, my understanding is that NR is it's more difficult to create NAD from that, or NMN is the precursor. And maybe I don't have that right. If you could, maybe just clarify that for me, because I always get that confused, and listeners may as well.
Yeah, I think it's just people will gravitate to certain things. The science speaks to the popularity of both. Both are precursors. I think what's fundamental is that both are preferable over NAD itself.
Mm.
And it's what we learned and why we believe that very strongly is because it's exactly the case with lion's mane. If you look at peptides, BDNF peptides, and for decades, scientists have been trying to able to increase BDNF levels. So BDNF levels for the brain are really important for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You get it from high-intensity exercise, and you get it from a couple of compounds, and one being lion's mane. But this is an important compound, and you cannot cross the blood-brain barrier by injecting more BDNF into the body. The body will resist it, reject it, not acknowledge it. And so again, our whole philosophy is working with the body, and so it sort of picks up that it's too artificial. And same with NAD levels. If you're IVing NAD, you'll get a boost, but you won't get a full absorption. You won't get as much absorption as just providing the body with the ingredients. Provide the master chef with the ingredients and let the master chef do the cooking. And provide the precursors Provide lion's mane, and you'll see a spike in BDNF levels in a natural way that's in harmony with your biology. Provide the NR or the NMN with to the body, and then the master chef will do the cooking and increase your NAD levels. And so that's what we've seen from absorption from levels when it comes to NAD versus NR, NMN. But NMN has been the favorite chosen child, in a way. But we're proponents of NR equally. And so NR is much easier. Both are extremely difficult, but we believe in a liposomal form. If we
Right.
think of absorption, we believe in liposomal. So if it's liposomal NMN or liposomal NR, that's fine. But yeah, so we produced, and it took us 2 years to get this to market, a stable
Wow.
liposomal NR. And so yeah, we're proponents of both. We've got an NR
Yeah.
product we like.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about your suite of products. So not only do you have the tinctures with the different extracts, you've got the coffee, you've got the gummies. I've got the Shilajit, but I gotta tell you, man, I don't know about the Shilajit. I just can't I can't do it. The taste is just too.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you have any tips on the best way to take Shilajit, but I've heard
that's a
the
great
benefits are amazing. I just can't get it in.
That's a great question. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen these yet, but we've got the gummies now.
I don't have the
So
Shilajit gummies. No.
we'll have to get you some. But the Shilajit gummies, it's a black cherry flavored, delicious. Because I think that's the only reason Shilajit hasn't scaled to the moon in terms of adoption. Because again, I put it right next to Lion's Mane. I'd put it in the top five without a doubt, especially for males and females, but for males for hormonal testosterone support, for females for estrogen and progesterone balancing, incredible beyond heavy metal chelation and detoxification, energy levels. It's also a transporter, so the fulvic acid within Shilajit allows you to shuttle other nutrients in. So with Shilajit, it's really good to stack with vitamin C, lion's mane, whatever your supplement stack is. If you add Shilajit to that, you're just going to get more of it shuttled into the cell. So it's really good at crossing that cell membrane. So yeah, if you can't take the resin, which is an acquired taste, depends on your level of hardcore. Some people will just take it like that. Some people have it in their water as a tea. I don't mind it as a tea in water with lemon. Like mid morning, late morning. It becomes more enjoyable with time. But then there's the Shilajit gummies, and then we've also brought out a liposomal sachet because we're proponents of liquids when it comes to absorption. So we've got a liposomal sachet which has lion's mane, cordyceps, chaga, vitamin C, and shilajit. But most importantly, it's all clinical doses. It's not, because this is another supplement industry element that people should know is that you see ingredients on the front, but it's really a fairy dust sprinkle of that ingredient. It's not a dose that's going to have a physiological response. So we're very proud of that single serve sachet, which is a cinnamon maple flavor, but that helps mask that shilajit because we know to get Shilajit to a wider audience, taste is important.
Yeah, I've tried, but I think the gummies or the sachet, I might try those just because. Yes, I've taken a pretty deep dive into the benefits of it. But
Yeah,
shit, I don't know. Yeah, for me, if I'm going to take it, I have to at least enjoy it somewhat, or not hate it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, and that's been a big learning for us, I guess, with the US market in particular, is just taste is very important.
Hmm.
Australians will see if Australians will be like, if it's good for me, I'll take it. That's the
Yeah.
Australian mentality. But in the US, you're very good with flavors and things of that nature. So that's been part of our company evolution is to evolve beyond the tinctures to gummies to sachets for convenience and taste and things of that nature. So yeah,
Yeah. And I
those
just
are
want to circle back to one thing you said earlier about the need to supplement. Because I talk to people who say, well, you could just get all this stuff from food. You don't really have to supplement. Or 50 years ago, my parents and grandparents didn't take all these supplements. But I
mm,
think the reality is that our soil has been so depleted that the food we eat isn't even as nutritious as what our parents and grandparents used to eat. So it's a different earth now than
yeah.
it was, and we're getting different things from it. Not to mention all the extra things that are in the food, especially in the U.S., the things that we're allowed to eat compared to the rest of the world. just shocking. So would you agree
Yeah.
with that assessment that there is a real reason why we need to take supplements now versus your parents and grandparents not having to take them?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a very important thing for people to sort of wrap their heads around, that, the bread isn't the same bread it was 50 years ago. The tomato's not the same. The meat's not the same for many reasons. And as well, the levels of stress, the levels of work that we're doing now, as entrepreneurs or as business owners or as everyday people are much higher. So there's two prongs that are very different to what they were 40, 50 years ago. Not to say it wasn't stressful back then and difficult, but they weren't getting texts at 8 p.m. at night. They weren't getting phone calls on the weekend. They weren't looking at their emails. The level of cortisol is much higher now than it was 50 years ago, one. And two, yeah, the nutrients are not what they are. And so I think the only way you could defend that argument that I don't need a supplement is if you've done your bloods, and there's no deficiency there across zinc, iron, testosterone, whatever it may be, triglycerides. All of those things need to be, spectacular. And subjectively, I feel incredible. And if you can say that, and you've done your heavy metal testing and you've done everything else, then you get a pass. But that would be very few people.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I agree with the testing. I mean, it's so important to get your biomarkers tested just so you know what you're doing, right? Otherwise, you could be supplementing the wrong things or doubling up on something you don't need or just wasting your money. But that's an important point for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Julian, if people are interested in learning more about you, the company, the benefits of mushroom extracts, where can they find this information?
Yeah, at Life Cykel, Life Cykel is spelled LifeCykel, and that was probably an interesting learning. Spelling it differently was hard for people early on, but that's how it's spelled, and that's cycle, that's Scandinavian, because very early on we just felt that the Scandinavians do a lot of things right when it comes to health, when it comes to parental care, education, all of those things. So cykel.com or on Instagram or Facebook or any of those things. My email is Julian at Life Cykel. If anybody ever wants to reach out, happy to answer any questions. But yeah, that's sort of where you can find us, and we'd love people to give us a go and try our products and give us feedback.
Yeah, and I am looking forward to getting myself some of those Shilajit gummies just to try it out. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Julian, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining me.
Awesome. Thanks, John.